A man is dead in a rice field. His body is found at dawn, slumped beside his tools. There are no witnesses, no confession, no obvious suspect. And yet, within hours, a local magistrate will identify the killer with certainty. He will not use a confession extracted by force. He will not rely on a witness coming forward. He will solve the murder using a single farming tool, a cloudless afternoon, and the behavior of flies. This is not a legend. This is the oldest recorded forensic investigation in human history, and it happened in 13th century China, more than 600 years before the word forensics existed. To understand how, you have to understand what kind of world produced this method. Song Dynasty China was not a civilization that left justice to chance. It had a functioning legal bureaucracy, a standardized court system, and a class of officials called magistrates who were personally responsible for solving every crime in their jurisdiction. If a murder went unsolved, the magistrate was held accountable. His career, his reputation, and in some cases his freedom depended on finding the truth. This is the pressure that produces ingenuity. The investigator at the center of this story was a man named Song Si-ai. He was a forensic examiner, a legal scholar, and in 1247, he wrote a book that would change the history of criminal investigation. The book was called Washing Away of Wrongs in Chinese, 习缘记录. Historian Brian McKnight, who produced the first full English translation of the text, has described it as the world's first systematic forensic science manual. It contained instructions for determining cause of death, distinguishing drowning from strangulation, identifying poisoning from natural illness, and examining wounds to determine the weapon used. And it contained the fly. The case Song Si-ai described involved a murder committed with a sickle, a curved farming blade used to harvest rice. The victim had been slashed. The killer had cleaned his blade and returned it to the field alongside dozens of other workers, each carrying their own identical tool. There was no blood visible to the eye. There was no obvious evidence linking any one sickle to the crime. Song Si ordered every worker to lay their sickle on the ground in the open air. Then he waited. Within minutes, flies began to gather. Not on every sickle, on one. A single blade, visually indistinguishable from the rest, drew a dense, unmistakable cluster of blowflies to its surface. Invisible traces of blood, invisible traces of tissue, undetectable by any human sense but immediately apparent to insects whose entire biological existence is oriented toward the detection of organic matter at concentrations far below what any eye or nose could register. The owner of that sickle, confronted with the evidence of the flies, confessed. What Song Si understood and what took Western science centuries to formalize is that the natural world is full of detectors more sensitive than any instrument a human investigator carries. Anthropologist Pamela Crossley, in her work on Song Dynasty administrative culture, has written about how Chinese magistrates were trained to treat the natural environment itself as a source of legal evidence. Animals, insects, weather, decomposition, all of it was readable, if you knew how to look. This was not superstition. It was empiricism, operating without a laboratory. Song Si's manual described the life cycles of flies in detail. It explained how different insects arrive at a body at different stages of decomposition, how their presence or absence could establish a timeline, how the location of insect activity on a wound could confirm the cause of death. He was describing, with precision and practical intent, what modern forensic entomology would not systematize in the West until the late 19th century. Forensic historian Katherine Ramsland has pointed out that the gap between Song Si-ai's methods and modern forensic entomology is not a gap in knowledge, it is a gap in transmission. The knowledge existed, it was documented. It simply moved through a different part of the world, in a language that Western legal traditions did not read. Now, ask yourself what this reveals about how we construct the idea of progress. We talk about forensic science as a modern invention. We date it to the 19th century, to Europe, to the emergence of laboratories and professional investigators. But in 1247, a Chinese magistrate was already solving murders using insect behavior, wound analysis, and systematic physical examination. He was already thinking in the logic of forensic science evidence over confession, observation over assumption, the body as a document that does not lie. The difference was not intelligence. It was not civilization. It was which stories got told, in which languages, and which archives survived long enough to be read. The fly found the killer. Song-Si wrote it down. And for nearly 700 years, that knowledge sat in a text that most of the world could not access. You think forensic science began in the modern world? But the flies already knew.